No one expected a human to be the last hope of an alien empire. Least of all the aliens themselves. But as alarms screamed through the citadel of 7 species, and the life signs of Queen Aurelies dropped toward nothing, every advanced race in the chamber faced a terrifying truth. Their technology had failed. Their science had failed. And now, only a single human stood between survival and extinction. Dr. Elias Rowan stood very still. Not because he was calm, but because moving too fast might get him killed. The chamber around him looked more like a cathedral than a hospital. Floating rings of light circled the surgical platform. Alien symbols crawled across transparent screens. Tall figures with shimmering skin and glowing eyes watched from behind energy barriers. None of them trusted him. Most of them openly hated him. Humans were considered fragile, unpredictable, too emotional, too reckless. And yet, here he was. "The Queen's neural core is collapsing," announced a sharp, metallic voice. Time remaining, 9 minutes. Elias swallowed. On the platform lay Queen Aurelies of the Valari Dominion. Her body shimmered like liquid crystal, fractured by dark veins of failing energy. Every breath she took sent ripples of light through her skin, weaker each time. She had been stabbed by a phase spear during a failed peace summit. Valari medicine could heal almost anything. But not this. Their healers had tried everything: quantum grafts, temporal stasis, nanofusion repair. Each attempt only made her condition worse. Because the weapon wasn't just physical. It was human-made. Elias had helped design its medical countermeasures years ago, back on Earth, when humanity still sold weapons to stay relevant among the stars. That knowledge was the reason he was still alive. "You have 5 minutes to begin," said the Valari High Regent, his voice cold and layered with barely controlled rage. "If you fail, your species will answer for it." Elias didn't argue. He stepped forward. The surgical interface rejected his touch instantly. The system didn't recognize human neural patterns. "Of course it doesn't," Elias muttered. He pulled a small, worn device from his pocket. It was old by Galactic standards, human-built, crude, and entirely analog. He connected it directly to the interface, bypassing half the safeguards in the room. Alarms flared. "What is he doing?" someone shouted. "He's rewriting the access logic," another voice hissed in disbelief. Elias ignored them. Sweat ran down his neck as he worked fast, fingers flying with practiced desperation. Humans were bad at a lot of things. But improvisation under pressure. That was their specialty. The interface flickered, then turned green. Access granted. A wave of shocked silence swept the chamber. Elias didn't celebrate. He leaned over the Queen, studying the damage with narrowed eyes. Her internal systems weren't laid out logically. Valari biology was semi-energy based, layered in living light fields instead of organs. But pain was universal. "She's dying because her body is trying to heal the wrong thing," Elias said quietly. The High Regent stiffened. "Explain." "The spear created a paradox wound," Elias said. "Your systems keep trying to restore her original state. But the weapon keeps redefining what original means." He took a slow breath. "To save her, I have to let part of her die." The chamber erupted. "That is unacceptable. You will not experiment on our Queen. Humans always choose destruction." Elias looked up, his eyes burning with something fierce and stubborn. "Humans choose survival," he said. "Even when it hurts." The Queen's life signs dropped again. 4 minutes. The High Regent hesitated. Every Valari instinct screamed no. But every sensor told the same story. There was no other option. "Proceed," the Regent said at last. "But know this, human, if she dies, your name will be cursed across the stars." Elias nodded once. He activated the human device. Instead of repairing the Queen's energy fields, it did something completely different. It cut them. Cleanly. Precisely. Brutally. Light spilled from her body like shattered starlight. Several aliens turned away in horror. Elias's hands shook, but he didn't stop. He isolated the corrupted energy loop and severed it entirely, sacrificing an entire layer of Valari biological structure. Something no alien doctor would ever dare attempt. Because humans had learned something the galaxy hadn't. Sometimes, healing meant loss. The Queen convulsed once. Then, silence. No pulse. No glow. Flat readings across every display. Someone screamed. The High Regent stepped forward, fury blazing. Elias didn't move. "Wait," he said hoarsely. "Just wait." 10 seconds passed. Then 20. On the 42nd second, a faint glow returned. Different. Dimmer. But stable. The Queen inhaled. Her energy patterns reformed, not as they were before, but stronger. Simpler. Adaptive. She had changed. And she was alive. The chamber stood frozen. Elias sagged back, nearly collapsing as relief crashed into him. Against every rule. Against every belief. A human had saved an alien queen by doing the one thing no advanced civilization would ever allow themselves to do. Let go. Far above the citadel, signals began spreading across the galaxy. The story was already changing. And humanity's role in it was just beginning. The silence after Queen Aurelise opened her eyes was heavier than any alarm. Every being in the citadel felt it. Her glow was weaker than before, yes, but it was stable. Clean. The chaotic fractures that had been tearing her apart were gone, replaced by a calm, steady rhythm that no Valari sensor could fully explain. Dr. Elias Rowan barely noticed. His knees finally gave in, and he caught himself on the edge of the surgical platform. His hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the crash that always came after impossible pressure. His heart pounded like it was trying to escape his chest. "She's alive," someone whispered. The High Regent stepped closer, eyes scanning the Queen's energy field in disbelief. This configuration, it has never existed in Valari history. Queen Aurelise slowly turned her head. Her eyes opened fully, glowing not emerald, but a deep, unfamiliar blue. When she spoke, her voice echoed strangely, like it carried two harmonies instead of one. "I am changed." Several nobles recoiled. Change was dangerous to the Valari. Their entire civilization was built on preservation, perfect memory, perfect continuity, perfect order. Elias straightened slowly. "Yes," he said quietly, "but you're alive." The Queen studied him. Not with anger. Not with fear. With curiosity. "You severed part of my being," she said. Elias nodded. "To save the rest." "You did not ask permission." "I didn't have time." A long pause followed. Then something extraordinary happened. Queen Aurelise smiled. It was subtle. Alien. Almost missed. But the meaning was unmistakable. "Humans," she said, "are unacceptable by our standards." The guards tensed. Elias's jaw tightened. "And yet," she continued, "you succeed where perfection fails." The chamber erupted into layered voices, shock, confusion, outrage. The High Regent raised his staff, silencing them. "This changes nothing," he said sharply. "Humans remain a volatile species. Reckless. Dangerous." Elias met his gaze without flinching. "You built a galaxy where nothing breaks," Elias said. "But when something finally does, you don't know what to do." That struck deeper than any weapon. Within hours, the Citadel went into lockdown. Word of what happened leaked anyway. It always did. Across Valari space, across neutral systems, across human colonies still struggling for recognition, one message spread faster than light. A human saved the alien queen. By destroying part of her. The reaction was immediate. Some species were fascinated. Others were terrified. Human ambassadors were summoned, questioned, threatened. Trade routes paused. Defense networks quietly recalibrated with human unpredictability flagged as a risk factor. And Elias? He was placed under guard, not as a prisoner, but not as a guest either. His temporary quarters overlooked the Citadel's artificial horizon. Stars drifted slowly beyond the energy shield, indifferent to politics and fear. He sat alone, replaying the surgery in his mind. One mistake, one wrong cut, and humanity would have been erased from half the galaxy. A soft chime sounded. "You may enter," Elias said, not turning. The door opened. Queen Aurelise entered, unarmed, unguarded. Elias stood immediately. "Your Majesty, I." "Please," she said. "No titles. Not now." She moved slowly, still adjusting to her altered form. The glow beneath her skin pulsed differently than before, less decorative, more purposeful. "You should hate me," Elias said. "I changed you without consent." "Yes," she replied. "By Valari law, that is a crime." She stopped in front of him. "By reality," she added, "it is a gift." Elias looked up, surprised. "My people fear change," Aurelise continued. "We fear loss more than death. That is why we stagnated. That is why the spear nearly killed me." She placed a glowing hand against her chest. "But humans, you survive by adapting. You break yourselves and rebuild stronger." Elias exhaled slowly. "That's not bravery," he said. "It's desperation." The Queen tilted her head. "There is little difference." She stepped closer. "The Council will not forget this," she said. "Some will seek to control humans. Others will seek to eliminate you." Elias gave a tired half-smile. "Story of our species." "But I will remember," she said. "And I will speak." The next Galactic session was broadcast live. Billions watched. Queen Aurelise stood before the assembly, her altered glow visible even through low-grade feeds. "For centuries," she said, "we believed ourselves superior because we perfected control." She paused. "We were wrong." Murmurs rippled across the chamber. Humanity survives not because it is flawless, but because it is flexible. Where we preserve, they adapt. Where we hesitate, they act. Some delegates scoffed. Others leaned forward. "When faced with extinction," she continued, "it was not the most advanced species that saved me." Her eyes focused on the human delegation. It was the one willing to lose something to gain everything. The broadcast cut abruptly. Emergency protocols triggered. Fear had reached a tipping point. In the shadows of the galaxy, plans began forming. Not all of them peaceful. And on Earth, watching the transmission from a crowded medical center, a young human student whispered the same thought spreading through 1,000 alien minds. Humans were not weak. They were unpredictable. And that made them the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever underestimated. Fear does strange things to powerful civilizations. Across the galaxy, species that once ignored humanity began watching every human signal, every ship movement, every broadcast. What disturbed them wasn't human strength or numbers. It was human choice. Humans acted without perfect data. They took risks no logical system would approve. And sometimes, those risks worked. That made them impossible to predict. Within days of Queen Aurelisa's speech, the Valari Council fractured. Half believed humans should be protected. The other half believed humanity should be neutralized before it became a threat too large to control. The vote was never announced publicly, but the fleet movement was impossible to hide. 3 Valari enforcement armadas changed course toward human space under the excuse of strategic containment. To the galaxy, it looked like diplomacy. To humans, it looked like a warning. Elias Rowan watched the situation unfold from Earth, standing in a medical command center that suddenly felt far smaller than it used to. Screens displayed alien fleet trajectories, threat assessments, and worst-case outcomes that no one wanted to say out loud. "We can't win a direct fight," said Admiral Soto, her voice steady but grim. "They outgun us 10-1. Elias rubbed his eyes. He hadn't slept properly since the Citadel. "They don't want a fight," he said. "They want submission." The room fell quiet. "And if we don't submit?" someone asked. Elias looked up. "Then they'll force us to," he said. Humanity faced a familiar choice. One written into its history over and over again. Bow. Break. Or adapt. The Valari fleets stopped just outside human-controlled space. Then the ultimatum arrived. Human scientific autonomy would be restricted. Human weapons research would be monitored. All future medical cooperation would require alien oversight. And Dr. Elias Rowan, along with several other innovators, would be relocated for the safety of the galaxy. It was exile disguised as protection. The global response was immediate. Humans laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insulting. They still don't understand us, Admiral Soto said quietly. No, Elias replied. They understand exactly enough to be afraid. Instead of mobilizing weapons, humanity did something no one expected. They opened their data. Not the weapon schematics. Not classified defenses. They opened medical archives. Disaster recovery models. Improvised survival techniques from centuries of human history. How humans rebuilt cities after collapse. How they survived plagues, famines, wars, and planetary disasters without perfect tools. They showed the galaxy how often humans failed. And how often they stood back up. Alien analysts were baffled. Why would they expose weakness? One asked. They aren't exposing weakness, Queen Aurelies replied from her chamber. They are demonstrating resilience. The Valari fleets hesitated. Then the real crisis hit. A star in a neutral system began to collapse prematurely, threatening 6 inhabited worlds. Alien evacuation protocols activated immediately, but they were too slow. The physics didn't match any known model. Human scientists noticed something else. It's artificial, Elias said, staring at the data. Someone triggered it. No one wanted to say the next part out loud. If those planets were lost, blame would fall on humanity. It would justify containment, control, erasure. Elias made a decision. A very human one. Without waiting for approval, he transmitted a solution proposal directly to the Valari fleet commanders. It was messy, inefficient, dangerous. It involved sacrificing several human-built satellites to stabilize the star's collapse long enough for evacuation. Alien Command rejected it immediately. Too risky. Too imprecise. Elias sent a final message. Perfection will kill them, he wrote. Let us try. The human satellites moved before permission was granted. They burned. They tore apart. They destabilized the star just enough to slow its death spiral. Evacuation ships escaped by seconds. 6 worlds survived. Human assets were destroyed. Human losses were total. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The Valari fleets powered down their weapons. Queen Aurelies addressed the council one final time. Humans do not dominate, she said. They endure. And that, she added, is far more dangerous than conquest. The ultimatum was withdrawn. Restrictions were lifted. Not because humans were strong, but because they were willing to lose without surrendering who they were. On Earth, Elias stood outside beneath an open sky, watching stars that no longer felt so distant. Humanity had not been conquered. It had been acknowledged. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, alien civilizations began rewriting their most dangerous assumption. That survival belonged to the most advanced. They were wrong. It belonged to the most adaptable. Peace never arrives quietly. After the star crisis, the galaxy did not erupt into celebration. Instead, it entered a tense silence, like a battlefield just after the last shot is fired. Everyone waited for something to break. And something always did. Behind closed council chambers, fear hardened into resentment. Several species had watched humans act without permission, without perfect planning, and succeed. That success terrified them more than failure ever could. If humans could improvise solutions that ancient civilizations could not predict, then control was impossible. And what could not be controlled must be removed. The betrayal began as a whisper. A classified Valari report leaked across restricted channels, accusing humanity of engineering the star collapse to prove its value. The evidence was carefully edited. Context removed. Human sacrifice erased. What remained painted humanity as manipulators willing to gamble entire systems for influence. The lie spread faster than the truth ever could. Protests ignited on neutral worlds. Trade embargoes returned overnight. Several species withdrew recognition of human autonomy. On Earth, emergency sessions filled every hour. "They're setting us up," Admiral Soto said, slamming a data pad onto the table. "If this sticks, we become the galaxy's scapegoat." Elias Rowan stared at the scrolling accusations. "They don't need proof," he said quietly. "They need fear." Then the worst message arrived. Queen Aurelise was under council investigation. Removed from public view. Silenced. Humanity had lost its strongest voice. Or so the council believed. Because they underestimated one thing again. Humans didn't rely on permission to act. They relied on connection. While diplomats argued, human engineers and medics quietly reached out to alien civilians. The ones who had been evacuated, the ones whose lives had been saved by human satellites. Personal messages. Medical follow-ups. Aid shipments with no political markings. No speeches. No threats. Just help. A Valari child recovered from radiation sickness on a human-designed treatment rig. A neutral world rebuilt power grids using open-source human tech. Stories spread, not through official channels, but through families. Through gratitude. The council panicked. And panic leads to bad decisions. A covert strike was authorized. Not against Earth. Against Elias Rowan. They believed removing the symbol would weaken the species. They were wrong. The attempt came during a joint medical conference on a border station. A malfunctioning containment field. A tragic accident. Elias would have died. Except Queen Aurelise intervened. She had not been imprisoned. She had been waiting. She rerouted station security, locked down the chamber, and broadcast everything live, council orders included. The galaxy watched betrayal unfold in real time. "This is who you fear." Aurelise asked the assembly, her voice steady and burning. "A species that saves without asking, adapts without permission, and refuses to rule through fear." She turned toward Elias. "They do not seek dominion," she said. "They seek survival. Together." Several species withdrew from the council that day. Others followed. What emerged was not an empire. It was an alliance. Loose. Messy. Human. And for the first time in galactic history, adaptability became doctrine. Elias stood beside Aurelise as representatives signed the Adaptive Accord, a framework allowing shared innovation without control, response without hierarchy. "Do you know why this worked?" Aurelise asked him quietly. Elias shook his head. "Because humans don't fear change," she said. "You weaponized it." Elias smiled tiredly. "We just stopped pretending we could avoid it." Above the station, human ships flew alongside alien vessels. Not identical, not synchronized, but coordinated. Different strengths. Shared purpose. The galaxy had not been conquered. It had been convinced. And that was far more powerful. History did not remember the treaty. It remembered the moment after. The Adaptive Accord was signed quietly. No grand parade. No golden monuments. Just a shared agreement that no single species would control survival itself. For the first time, the galaxy accepted uncertainty as a strength rather than a flaw. And that idea terrified many. But it also gave hope. Human ships became common sights in alien systems, not as enforcers, but as responders. They arrived after disasters, after system failures, after impossible situations where perfect plans collapsed. Humans brought imperfect tools, flexible minds, and something most civilizations had long abandoned. Hope through action. Dr. Elias Rowan never sought fame. He returned to medicine, working in shared stations where alien and human doctors trained together. His methods confused many. He encouraged questioning protocols. He allowed failure during training. He told young surgeons something no alien teacher ever had. "If everything goes wrong," he said, "you're still responsible for what happens next." Some found that terrifying. Others found it freeing. Queen Aurelise recovered fully, not to her old form, but to something new. Her altered biology gave her an intuitive understanding of adaptive systems. She became a bridge between rigid tradition and necessary change. Together, they represented something dangerous. A future no one species controlled. Years passed. Then came the silence. Entire regions of space went dark. Communication relays failed. Automated defenses shut down without warning. Ancient alien systems, ones that had never failed, stopped responding. Panic returned. Analysis revealed the truth. The galaxy had grown dependent on perfection. Too dependent. A cascading failure spread through old, rigid infrastructures that could not adapt once their core assumptions collapsed. Once again, the galaxy faced extinction. And once again, humanity was not the strongest force available. But it was the most prepared. Human systems were messy by design. Redundant. Inefficient. Built to fail and recover. While ancient alien networks collapsed entirely, human-built hybrids limped, but stayed alive. Elias stood before the emergency coalition, older now, lines of exhaustion etched into his face. "We can't fix everything," he said honestly, "but we can keep things alive long enough to change." The plan was dangerous. It required abandoning entire legacy systems and replacing them with adaptive frameworks that would evolve constantly. No permanent stability. No guaranteed outcomes. Many species hesitated. Queen Aurelise spoke. "We already chose perfection once," she said. "It nearly killed us." The vote passed. The galaxy rebuilt itself, not as a flawless machine, but as a living system. And it worked. Not cleanly. Not easily. But it worked. Years later, in a quiet medical bay orbiting a blue-green world, Elias watched a young human and an alien apprentice argue over a treatment approach. They disagreed loudly, passionately, and then they laughed. Elias smiled. This was the legacy. Not dominance. Not control. But shared stubborn survival. Aurelise joined him at the viewport. "Do you think they will remember you?" she asked. Elias shrugged. "Doesn't matter." She studied the stars. "They will remember humanity." "For what?" he asked. She answered without hesitation. "For choosing to act when perfection failed. For sacrificing comfort for survival. For teaching the galaxy that fear of change is more dangerous than change itself." Elias exhaled slowly. Humans had never been the strongest. Never the smartest. Never the most advanced. But when the universe demanded a choice, to freeze, to kneel, or to adapt, humanity chose to move forward. And the galaxy followed. Not because humans ruled it, but because humans showed it how to survive.